Welcome to today's Coach's Corner. I'm Mike Van Hoozer, and today we want to get right into the content and build on what we talked about on Monday Morning Moments this week about positivity and possibility thinking and tie that into resiliency. So today I'm going to give you 5 habits of resilient people based on the work that we've done in working with athletes and working with business leaders and entrepreneurs. And I'm also going to give you 7 characteristics of resiliency and talk about how you can apply that in your life. Monday, I mentioned a post that John Gordon had mentioned about positivity, and a lot of people, or some people, weighed in on the circumstances and said that really positivity is based on circumstances. And when they weighed in on the comments of that, just felt like that it's more of a situation that's based on a circumstance, whether you can be positive or not. And I know he believes through all of his writing, as well as the work that we've done, that it's really a mindset based on choice, that it's not based on circumstances, and that positivity is tied to possibility thinking and also tied to resiliency ultimately, and allows you to persevere through challenging circumstances and even in the good circumstances to achieve your goals. So let's get right into the content today, because I want to share a few things with you I think that will help you. And let's talk about, first of all, habits that we see of resilient people and the work that we've done and the people that we've studied. So as you look at this, kind of the first thing that we see in studying resilient people and working with them is that there's a habit that successful people and high performers leverage setbacks as side streets to success. So let me say that again. Successful people and high performers leverage setbacks as side streets to success. So beyond that being a great sentence with great alliteration in it, what does that really mean? Well, when a setback comes or a challenging circumstance happens to a high performer or somebody who's very resilient, they see that not as something that's a dead end, but it's just a side street. They were going down a main street toward their goals, and a setback happens. Well, they just see that as a side street that they need to navigate to get back on the road to success. And I think as we look at setbacks that we have in our lives, we can't just say, well, that's a dead end and I shouldn't pursue that goal anymore. We need to look at that as a side street, and there's a possibility that we can learn something from that. Maybe there's people that we're going to meet along the way around that, but that it's still leading to a road to success, significance, and impact for us. And resilient people do that. And as you think about resiliency in your own life, you need to develop that habit towards developing, looking at setbacks in a new way, in a different way. A second habit that we see that's common among resilient people is they view trials as a part of the process. They're not shocked by the trial. They maybe didn't expect it, but they view it as a part of the journey. And they know they're going to have trials. They don't wish them to happen. They don't prophesy that it happen. They don't want it to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But they know that trials will come. So they're not totally shocked and shut down when a trial comes, but they say, okay, that's a trial, but I want to know that that's a part of the process, and I'm going to still journey through this to get to accomplishing the goal. A third characteristic is related to this, and they embrace the opportunity to persevere through the challenges. So as they see the challenges, they embrace that. They don't love it, but they embrace that as a part of the process, and they persevere through those challenges. So these are linked together because they're able to say, well, I didn't expect that, I didn't want that to happen, but I'm going to embrace that and learn from it and persevere through this challenge. A fourth habit that we see is they quickly get into problem solving and possibility thinking quickly, or that mode. And that's a mindset for them, problem solving and possibility thinking. The most resilient people quickly get into how can we solve this problem and how can we think in terms of possibilities. So what does that look like in practice? Well, a non-resilient person, may have a challenge and they see it as, oh, this is really bad. They're kind of like Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh, that this is bad and it's raining today and it's probably going to rain tomorrow and my life is horrible. And, they just dwell in that kind of doldrum of this is horrible. Resilient people acknowledge that the setback might be bad. They're not blind to the circumstance that there's a bad circumstance there. But they quickly get into, well, this is bad, but how can we solve this? How can we think about possibilities? What if we did this? What if I did this? How would that affect the outcome, and how would that allow me to persevere through the challenge? So getting into possibility thinking quickly is important for you as you want to persevere and become more resilient in your own life. And that's a key thing. That's a session all alone by itself. But I think it's something important, and you'll see how the last 3 bullet points that we talked about are linked, because possibility thinking is the key and problem-solving mode, and not just dwelling in, the bad circumstance. And then it leads to this 5th habit of having incredible recovery time. And this is something that we have developed a model around, and working with our athletes especially around how can they improve their recovery time. And basically, it's more of a qualitative than quantitative measure. And recovery time is just how long does it take you to get from a moment you didn't expect something to happen into the next moment. And I don't get out there with a stopwatch with my athletes and say, okay, that was 3.2 minutes, that you've been still dwelling on that, but you finally got out of it. Let's see if we can improve that. It's more of a qualitative measurement. But as we talk about that and we give them tips and techniques on how to improve that recovery time, and we've done other sessions on that as well, and on our website you can find blog articles around recovery time that we have. As you think about recovery time, as they realize that that's a tool and technique that they can use and that you can use in your own life, it allows you to improve that. And again, it's getting into that possibility thinking and problem solving quickly to recover from that bad moment and be able to think about things that are going to put you in a positive mindset, first of all, and then lead to constructive actions as well. So those are 5 habits that we see with resilient people. So let's talk about resilient characteristics and what that looks like, and some of the things that we see in resilient people. The first one is possibilities versus limiting beliefs. And this actually connects with the possibility thinking that we talked about earlier. So resilient people think in terms of possibilities. Non-resilient people think in terms of limiting beliefs. I can't do that. I haven't ever done that before. I'm not going to be able to accomplish this. This is a dead end. Versus thinking in terms of possibilities. I haven't done it yet, but I know I can. And I'll put a link to another podcast episode that we've done, especially on our YouTube page, and link that also on there in the description, as far as developing an I will mindset. But that's key as far as what we're talking about here, is that resilient people are thinking in terms of possibilities. Non-resilient people think in terms of limiting beliefs. The second characteristic that we see in resilient people is that they think in terms of solutions versus problems. So if you're trying to develop resiliency in your own life, you're going to think in terms of solutions and not problems. The bigger you make something in your mind, the bigger it's going to get. Whatever you choose to focus on, as we've said before, magnifies in size. So if we think about solutions and start focusing on that, those are going to become bigger and more possible in our lives. But if we just think about the problems and just dwell on that, those are going to become bigger in our minds, and they're not going to allow us to actually move towards a solution and solving the problem and persevering through the challenge. Another characteristic that we see and try to develop in resilient people is that they're curious versus cautious. Curious versus cautious. So what does that mean? They ask questions. They're curious about things versus being cautious and being stagnant and hesitant to actually move out. Curiosity allows you to move towards solutions and thinking, what if I did this a different way? Or when other people have met or faced these challenges before, how have they met them and what have they done to solve them? So when you're curious, you can ask more constructive questions, and you're not hesitant to say, well, that's the way I've always done it before, or I can't do that because that would be something totally different. A fourth characteristic is opportunities versus challenges. So when you're thinking in terms of opportunities, you're thinking about things that could happen, what could be in the future, and it relates to the possibilities. As you're thinking about challenges, again, it's just dwelling on the challenges that are in front of you. So opportunity thinking is really important when we're thinking about how can we solve this problem. One other characteristic that we see in resilient people is they're dynamic versus static. And you could equate this to a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. But they think in terms of being dynamic in their growth patterns and being able to grow and develop over time versus just being static and saying, well, this is my talent and this is how far it'll go. They're able to grow that, become dynamic in terms of what they see, how resilient they are, being able to grow that, and looking at things from a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Another one is that they're constructive versus critical. So in thinking through that and thinking through, again, resilient characteristics, they're constructive in their thinking and the questions they ask and the path they take versus being critical. And I think the ways that non-resilient people show up a lot of times is being critical, not only of other people and of the circumstance, but also of themselves. And having positive self-talk, not being critical towards yourself is really important, and being constructive in the feedback that you give yourself. And it begins with you and how you talk to yourself, and making sure that you're encouraging yourself and that you're working towards a realistic solution, but also having a positive mindset towards that. And resilient people are constructive and they're positive. They're not cautious and critical in thinking through that. And then the final thing that we see as far as resilient characteristics is that resilient people are positive and proactive versus reactive. So they're proactive in solutions versus being reactive. And they're proactive in thinking about scenarios and planning for those, and then being proactive in the response versus being reactive. And when a challenging circumstances comes into our lives, I think that we need to respond versus react. And being responsive is different than, kind of a reaction that's not based on anything. It's not based on a principle. It's just based on the circumstance. And so we may react in the wrong way. But proactive people are responsive, and it's based on principles of success that they know will carry them forward in this circumstance as well. So I know we covered a lot of material there, but hopefully that gives you some things to think about habits that you can recreate yourself and be able to apply from resilient people, and then characteristics that you can develop and think through. And in the comments, I want you to think through maybe a goal that you're trying to pursue, and then what are some characteristics based on what we've talked about that are positive characteristics of resilient people that you can apply in your own life. It's important. You can develop this. I think sometimes we think about resiliency and saying, well, you're either born with it or not. And while it may be true that there are people who are born with more resiliency and it's more of a natural tendency, we believe that you can grow that and you can develop that in your own life. And so I want to encourage you with that today. And again, think about some characteristics that we've talked about, some habits that we've talked about. Comment on what's working for you and what you're going to apply in your own life. And I want you to make it a great rest of the week and continue to be positive, continue to think about possibilities, and continue to be resilient no matter what circumstance you face.